The evening air in Eket was thick with the scent of burning firewood and the distant hum of crickets. The village was quiet, with only the occasional bark of a dog breaking the silence. Mary arrived at her grandmother's house just before sunset, tired from the long journey, but excited to be in a new place. Her grandmother, Mama Eka, welcomed her with open arms, her wrinkled face breaking into a warm smile. "My daughter, you are welcome," Mama Eka said, pulling her into a tight embrace. Mary looked around the small compound, taking in the mud house with a thatched roof, the calabashes hanging from the wooden poles, and the large mango tree that stood proudly in the middle of the yard. "This place is so different from the city," Mary said, dropping her bag on the ground. Mama Eka chuckled. "Yes, my child, this is home, and here we follow the ways of our ancestors." As they sat on the wooden bench outside, Mary listened to her grandmother tell stories about the village, the traditions, and the spirits that roamed the land. "One thing you must never do, Mary," Mama Eka said suddenly, her voice serious, "is sweep at night." Mary raised an eyebrow. "Sweep at night? Why not?" Mama Eka's eyes darkened. "It is forbidden. When you sweep at night, you disturb the spirits. They do not like it." Mary laughed. "Grandma, spirits? You still believe in all those things?" Mama Eka's face remained stern. "Believe or not, the spirits exist, and they do not forgive easily." Mary waved a hand dismissively. "Nothing will happen. Spirits don't scare me." Mama Eka sighed, looking at her granddaughter with worry. "Just promise me you won't do it." Mary nodded absent-mindedly, but deep down, she had no intention of following the rule. Later that night, after dinner, Mary sat on her small mat inside the hut, scrolling through her phone. The room was dimly lit by an old kerosene lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. She looked around and frowned. The floor was covered in dry leaves and dust that had blown in from outside. She hated dirt. "What's the big deal?" she muttered. "I'll just sweep quickly." She grabbed the broom from the corner and stepped outside. The village was silent, the air cool against her skin. Crickets sang in the distance, and a faint breeze rustled the leaves of the mango tree. Mary started sweeping, her broom scratching against the ground. The sound seemed louder in the silence of the night. She worked fast, pushing the dirt and leaves into a pile. Then she heard it, a whisper, software barely audible. She froze, her heart pounding. The whisper came again, floating through the air like the wind. "Why?" Mary turned sharply, scanning the yard. Nothing. The night was still. The trees stood motionless. The stars twinkled above. She shook her head. "Just my imagination." She continued sweeping. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The leaves she had gathered scattered in all directions. The broom slipped from her hands. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Then she heard it again. A voice, low, hollow. "Why did you call us?" Mary's breath hitched. Who's there?" Silence. Her pulse raced. The air grew heavy, thick with something unseen. Then, from the shadows of the mango tree, a figure moved. Tall, thin, unnatural. Mary gasped and stumbled backward. The figure took a slow step forward, its eyes glowing like burning coals. The air turned icy. Mary tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure stretched a long, bony hand toward her. "You have disturbed our rest." Mary turned and ran, her feet barely touching the ground as she dashed inside the hut. She slammed the wooden door shut, her chest heaving. The whispers grew louder. Shadows moved outside the window. The kerosene lamp flickered. Then, the door creaked open on its own. A scream caught in Mary's throat, and then a hand grabbed her ankle. She kicked and scrambled backward, but the grip was strong, cold, inhuman. "Mama! Mama!" she screamed. The door burst open and Mama Eka rushed in, a burning charm in her hand. "Leave her alone," Mama Eka shouted, waving the charm. The shadows hissed. The grip on Mary's ankle released, and the air seemed to clear. Mary sobbed, her body shaking violently. Mama Eka knelt beside her, cradling her face. "Didn't I warn you, child?" Mary could barely speak. She just clung to her grandmother, her heart hammering in her chest. That night, Mary did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard whispers, saw shadows moving, felt unseen eyes watching her. By morning, she was pale, her body weak. Mama Eka prepared a calabash filled with sacred water and took Mary to the village shrine. "You must ask for forgiveness," Mama Eka said. The shrine was an ancient place, hidden deep in the forest. Smoke rose from the ground, and strange carvings covered the stones. An old priest sat in the middle, his eyes clouded with wisdom. "She has angered the spirits," Mama Eka told him. The priest studied Mary, then nodded. "She must beg for mercy before it is too late." Mary, trembling, fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The priest began to chant. The ground rumbled beneath them. The trees swayed without wind. Then the air shifted. A heavy silence fell. Then a deep voice echoed through the shrine. "We have heard her." The wind howled, then suddenly stopped. It was over. Mary collapsed, gasping for breath. The priest nodded. "She is forgiven, but let her never forget. Some rules are not meant to be broken." Mary swallowed hard, nodding. She would never, ever sweep at night again. Even though the priest had said Mary was forgiven, she could still feel something was not right. That night, as she lay on her mat, she struggled to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard faint whispers. "She called us. We are watching." Her body stiffened. She pulled her wrapper over her head, squeezing her eyes shut. Then something moved in the room. It was faint, like a shadow passing across the wall. Mary held her breath. A cold breeze brushed against her skin. Slowly, she turned her head, and her heart stopped. In the dim light, she saw it. A dark figure crouching in the corner of the room, its long fingers scratching against the wall, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Mary's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure inched closer. Her body refused to move. Then the figure whispered, "You think it is over?" Mary's breath hitched. The air in the room grew cold. A foul stench filled her nose, like something rotten. She wanted to call Mama Eka, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Suddenly, a loud knock shook the door. "Mary!" It was Mama Eka's voice. "Mary, open this door!" Mary sprang up, her body drenched in sweat. The moment she looked back at the corner, the figure was gone. Shaking, she rushed to the door and flung it open. Mama Eka stared at her, her eyes full of worry. "What did you see?" Mary's lips trembled. "Grandma, they are still here." Mama Eka's face darkened. "I feared this would happen." She grabbed Mary's hand. "Come, we must go back to the shrine. You have awakened something more powerful than we thought." They hurried back to the forest, where the old priest was already waiting. It was as if he knew they were coming. "You saw it, didn't you?" the priest asked, staring at Mary. Mary nodded, her hands shaking. The priest sighed. "This is worse than I thought. The spirits have followed you home." Mary's knees felt weak. "But I begged for forgiveness." The priest shook his head. "You disturbed something ancient, child, and now it refuses to let you go." Mary's stomach twisted. "What do I do?" The priest picked up a small calabash filled with black liquid. "You must do one final ritual, but this time, if you fail, you may never escape." Mary's heart pounded. Are you ready? The priest asked. She hesitated. Was she ready? Did she even have a choice? Taking a deep breath, she nodded, and the ritual began. The old priest placed the small calabash in front of Mary. The black liquid inside swirled as if it was alive. The air around them felt heavier, the night darker. Drink this, the priest instructed. It will cleanse you, separate your spirit from theirs, and break their hold on you. Mary's hands trembled as she picked up the calabash. The liquid inside smelled strange, like earth, fire, and something rotten. She hesitated. What if, what if it doesn't work? She whispered. Mama Eka placed a firm hand on her shoulder. It must work, my child. You must be free. Mary took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and drank. The moment the liquid touched her tongue, her body stiffened. A sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, dropping the calabash. Her vision blurred. The ground beneath her seemed to spin. The voices around her faded. Then, a deafening silence. Her body felt weightless, like she was floating in the air. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the shrine. She was standing in a strange place, a vast, endless darkness stretching in all directions. And then they appeared, tall, faceless shadows, moving without sound, surrounding her, watching. Mary's breath came in short gasps. What do you want from me? She whispered. One of the shadows moved closer. You called us. Mary shook her head. No, I was only sweeping. The shadows hissed. You disturbed our rest, and now we choose you. Mary's heart dropped. No, no, the priest is helping me. I drank the potion. A deep laugh echoed around her. The ritual has been rejected. Mary's blood turned to ice. You are ours now. The shadows lunged. Mary screamed. Mary's body convulsed violently. Her eyes rolled back. Foam spilled from her mouth. Mama Eka cried out, Priest, what is happening to her? The old priest's face was pale. He stepped back, shaking his head. The spirits have rejected the ritual. Mama Eka's hands trembled. What does that mean? The priest's voice was grim. They have chosen her. Mama Eka collapsed to the ground. No, my child. Mary's body jerked. Then suddenly she went still. Her eyes snapped open. But something was different. Her pupils were dark, too dark. And when she smiled, it was not Mary's smile. It was theirs. The shrine was silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. Mary's body lay motionless on the ground, her eyes open but lifeless. Mama Eka knelt beside her, shaking. Priest, please, there must be something we can do. The old priest's face was grim. He stared at Mary's still body, then closed his eyes as if listening to something unseen. After a long pause, he finally spoke. There is one last way. Mama Eka grabbed his arm. Tell me, I will do anything. The priest exhaled deeply. She must go to them herself. Mama Eka's heart stopped. No. The priest nodded. She must enter the evil forest before sunrise. She must go alone. If she succeeds, they will release her. But if she fails... He did not finish his sentence. Mama Eka understood. If Mary failed, she would be lost forever. The priest instructed Mama Eka not to move Mary's body. She will wake when it is time, he said. So they waited. The night was long. The air was heavy. Mama Eka sat beside Mary, holding her cold hands, whispering prayers. The wind howled outside. The fire burned low. Shadows danced on the walls of the shrine. Then, just before dawn, Mary gasped. Her body jerked, and she sat up, her eyes wide in terror. She clutched her chest, breathing heavily. Mama Eka grabbed her. Mary, my child, you are back. Mary looked around, confused. Grandma, what happened? Before Mama Eka could answer, the priest stepped forward. Mary, he said solemnly, the spirits have spoken. They will not release you unless you go to them yourself. Mary's stomach twisted. What do you mean? The priest's eyes were dark. You must walk into the evil forest alone. You must find the ancient tree where they rest. You must beg for their forgiveness. Mary's hands shook. Alone? The priest nodded. And whatever happens, you must never turn back. Mary swallowed hard. Mama Eka grabbed her shoulders. Mary, listen to me. You must be strong. You must not fear. Tears burned in Mary's eyes. But Grandma, what if I don't make it? Mama Eka's voice broke. You must make it. Mary looked at the priest. When do I go? The priest's face was solemn. Now. Mary's heart pounded. She took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and stood up. Then she walked out of the shrine, alone. The sky was still dark as Mary stepped into the forest. The trees loomed over her, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers. The deeper she walked, the colder it became. She could hear whispers all around her. She is here. She comes to us. Mary clenched her fists and kept walking. Her feet sank into the soft earth. The path was barely visible. The forest felt alive, as if watching her. Then she saw it, the ancient tree. It was massive, its bark black and cracked. Strange symbols were carved into it, glowing faintly. Mary took a deep breath and stepped closer. She knelt before the tree. With a shaking voice, she whispered, I am sorry. The air around her grew colder. I did not know. I did not mean to disturb you. The whispers grew louder. The shadows around her moved. She shut her eyes. Please, let me go. Silence. Then, a voice. You have come, but have you truly learned? Mary's heart pounded. Yes, I have. The voice laughed. Then prove it. Suddenly, the ground shook. The whispers turned to screams. And behind her, something moved. Mary's breath caught in her throat. She could feel it. Something was behind her, watching, waiting. And then it spoke. Turn around, Mary. Mary stood still, staring at the big old tree. A voice called out, Mary, turn around. But she refused. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She took a deep breath and kept looking forward. She would not listen. Then the voice changed. It became soft and gentle. Mary, please turn around. I am your mother. Come to me, it said. It sounded exactly like her real mother. For a moment, Mary felt her heart ache. But deep inside, she knew the truth. This was not her mother. It was the spirit trying to trick her. No, Mary said, her voice small but firm. I will not turn around. The forest became silent. Then the spirit spoke again, this time in a serious tone. Mary, I beg you, I am your mother. Turn now. The wind blew through the trees, and strange marks on the tree began to glow. Mary clenched her fists. I know what you are, she whispered. You are not my mother. You cannot fool me. The spirit's voice changed. It was no longer kind. You are disobeying me. If you do not turn around, you will be lost forever, it warned. But Mary stood her ground. She would not be tricked. The whole forest seemed to be watching her. The trees, the wind, and even the shadows stood still. She remembered what the priest had said. She must never look back, no matter what. The spirit tried again, using the voice of her mother. Mary, please, turn around. I love you. Mary took a deep breath. I will not turn, she said, her voice strong. Even though she was scared, she refused to give in. The forest whispered around her, but the spirit's voice slowly faded. Mary had won. She was alone again, but she knew she had passed the test. You are brave, Mary, the spirit said in a gentle tone. I forgive you. Mary stood still. Her heart was still pounding, but she felt a strange peace. Even though she had not turned around, the spirit's kind laugh made her feel safe. The wind calmed, and the dark forest felt less scary. Slowly, Mary turned and walked back toward the path. In the distance, she saw the warm light of the shrine. When she reached it, her grandmother was waiting with tearful eyes and open arms. "My dear child, you are safe," Mama Eka said softly. The old priest nodded. "The spirits have forgiven you. You have shown great strength by not turning back," he explained in a calm voice. Mary returned home with Grandma after the strange events in the forest. The next few days, she helped Grandma with simple tasks. She swept the yard, cooked meals over a small fire, and even helped wash clothes in the river. Each chore made the house feel warm and real again, but Mary's mind was still troubled by that night in the evil forest. Every time she stirred the pot or swept the dirt from the floor, Mary remembered the cold whisper of the spirit. Even though the spirit had laughed and forgiven her, the memory of its voice still haunted her. The simple tasks brought her comfort, but they also reminded her of the deep secrets of the village, a place where unseen forces lurked behind every shadow. That night, after dinner and while the fire was dying down, Mary sat quietly in the small room where Grandma slept. The soft sound of Grandma's breathing filled the silence. Mary could not sleep. With a heavy heart, she got up and gently went to Grandma's side. "Grandma," Mary said in a soft voice, "I have come here to spend time with you, but I must leave the village at once. I am no longer comfortable here." Grandma's eyes opened slowly, filled with both sadness and understanding. "Oh, my dear child," she whispered, reaching out to hold Mary's hand. "You have seen and felt things that no one should. I have always told you to obey the elders and to respect our ways. But sometimes the truth is hard to live with." Mary's voice trembled as she continued. "I know now that the elders' words have meaning. I have learned the lesson, but I also feel that this place holds too many memories of that dark night. I am afraid that I will never feel safe here again." Grandma sighed and gently caressed Mary's hair. "I understand, my child. The village is old, and its secrets run deep. If your heart tells you to leave, then you must follow it, but never forget the lessons of our traditions and the wisdom of our elders." The soft night was filled with a quiet sorrow, as Mary realized that her journey was not only about facing the spirits, but also about finding peace within herself. She packed her few belongings slowly, each fold of her cloth a reminder of the home she once knew. Grandma helped Mary pack, her eyes filled with love and worry. Before dawn broke, Mary hugged Grandma tightly. "I will always love you, and I will remember everything you taught me," she promised. Then, with a heavy heart but a determined step, Mary left the small village behind. As she walked away, the cool morning air brushed her face. Every step was filled with both fear and hope. Mary knew that leaving was the only way to free herself from the haunting memories of that dark night. And in her heart, she carried the truth that it is good to obey and listen to our elders, for their wisdom can protect us even when we must choose a hard path. Her journey had just begun, and though the road ahead was uncertain, Mary was ready to find a new place where her spirit could heal and her heart could finally rest.